Imagine the hum of precision machinery, a rhythmic ballet of steel and silicon echoing through a pristine factory floor in southern Germany. Sunlight streams through vast windows, illuminating the focused faces of engineers and technicians, their movements precise, almost serene. This was once a common sight, a testament to a continent where industrial prowess met meticulous craftsmanship. You saw families planning summer holidays, children dreaming of university, and retirees enjoying golden years, all underpinned by a robust economy. The air itself felt thick with the promise of stability, an unspoken guarantee that tomorrow would build on today's successes. Yet look closely now, and you might see the same machines, silent, gathering dust, the once vibrant hum replaced by an unsettling quiet. The faces etched with concern, not serenity. This is not fiction. It is consequence. Before we delve deeper into how this transformation unfolded, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching this from? Your perspective helps us understand the global reach of these unfolding realities. You are about to witness the meticulous deconstruction of a grand illusion. We will reveal how Europe, once lauded as a fortress of prosperity and social welfare, began a subtle yet irreversible decline. This isn't about blaming individuals or single events. It's about exposing the foundational flaws in a system that promised perpetual growth but was built on sand. Few dare to speak of this truth because it challenges deeply ingrained beliefs and comfortable narratives. But understanding it is crucial. We will show you precisely how decades of seemingly rational decisions led to an outcome few predicted, yet one that was entirely inevitable. For decades, Europe truly believed it had engineered a self-sustaining perpetual motion machine of prosperity. After the Cold War, a powerful industrial base, expansive welfare states, and the unifying euro created an unprecedented era of stability. This system worked because it tapped into a perceived peace dividend, leveraging globalized trade and open borders. Factories hummed with cheap, reliable energy, primarily from Russia, fueling industries that produced world-class goods. Everyone benefited. Businesses expanded, workers enjoyed secure jobs, and governments funded generous social programs. The implicit promise was clear: work hard, innovate, and the system would reward you with a secure, improving future. It felt like an unbreakable covenant between effort and reward, a bedrock of societal trust. If you're finding this analysis insightful and want to understand the deeper truths no one else fully explains, consider subscribing. We consistently break down complex global narratives into actionable understanding. Meet Anna Müller, 46, a lead engineer in a German precision manufacturing firm. Every morning, she drives past the familiar landscape of orderly fields and small towns, her mind already on the intricate problems awaiting her at the factory. Anna embodies the European middle-class dream. She meticulously earned her engineering degree, secured a stable, respected position, bought a modest home, and raised a family. Her pride isn't just in her technical excellence, but in her contribution to Germany's industrial heart, the very engine of European prosperity. She believed implicitly that her diligent effort, combined with the continent's robust economic framework, guaranteed a secure future, not just for herself, but for her children. This sense of unyielding stability, however, was built upon foundations that, while appearing solid, had never been truly tested. The reliance on cheap Russian energy, for instance, wasn't seen as a risk but a strategic advantage, a cost-cutting measure bolstering competitiveness. Similarly, the deep integration into global supply chains, outsourcing production to distant lands, was hailed as peak efficiency. These decisions, rational at face value, were like building a magnificent house on a vast, intricate network of invisible pipes, assuming the flow would never cease. No one questioned the source, only the immediate benefit. This era of confidence, in hindsight, was a period of accumulating subtle vulnerabilities, hidden beneath layers of perceived success. This was the unchallenged paradigm, a seemingly perfect harmony of market forces and social responsibility, where Europe stood as a global beacon. But beneath the surface, the seeds of future instability were already sown. The continent's industrial might, its social safety nets, its entire way of life, became unknowingly tethered to external currents and a geopolitical calm that was, in fact, a temporary lull. What you are witnessing now, the unraveling of that once assured future, is not a random twist of fate. It is the undeniable consequence of choices made, of assumptions left unexamined, and of a structural model that has finally reached its breaking point. The truth of its fragility is now undeniable. The initial crack in this seemingly flawless European edifice emerged from what seemed, at the time, an undeniably rational pursuit: efficiency. Driven by the relentless imperative of global competition and the allure of cost reduction, Europe's leaders and industrialists made a series of pivotal decisions. They embraced deep integration into global supply chains, outsourcing production of countless components to distant lands where labor was cheaper and regulations less stringent. Crucially, they doubled down on an abundant, ostensibly stable source of energy: Russian natural gas. This wasn't seen as a gamble, but a pragmatic, modern strategy, a shrewd economic calculation designed to bolster competitiveness and fuel an ever-expanding industrial base. It appeared to be the smart, inevitable path forward, a testament to Europe's ability to adapt and thrive in a new global order. The immediate rewards of these choices were intoxicating. Factories across the continent, now unburdened by the highest energy costs or the full weight of domestic labor, hummed with renewed vigor. Exports surged, inflation remained subdued, and European products maintained their competitive edge on the world stage. It felt like a triumph of economic foresight, a new golden age where everyone benefited from this globalized efficiency. This period, flush with apparent success, cultivated a dangerous complacency. The architects of this system believed they were optimizing for prosperity, unaware that each outsourced component, each cubic meter of cheap gas, was subtly weaving a tapestry of hidden dependencies. They were building a magnificent structure, but its foundations were increasingly anchored in distant, unstable ground, an invisible error accumulating beneath layers of perceived strength. Concurrently, another set of seemingly benevolent decisions further shaped the continent's destiny: the ambitious project of the euro and the continuous expansion of generous welfare states. The single currency, introduced with promises of frictionless trade and internal market stability, aimed to forge an unbreakable economic union. Alongside this, governments continued to bolster social safety nets, guaranteeing healthcare, education, and pensions, solidifying a uniquely European social contract. These policies, too, were hailed as progressive, ensuring social cohesion and a dignified life for all citizens. They fostered a collective sense of security, reinforcing the illusion that Europe had found the perfect balance between market dynamism and social responsibility. Anna, like millions, saw these as pillars of her stable life, the very guarantees that made her hard work worthwhile and her future predictable. Yet, beneath this veneer of stability, these rational decisions were quietly installing the very mechanisms of future vulnerability. The deep integration, the reliance on external energy, the one-size-fits-all currency, and the expanding welfare state all became long-term bets on a perpetual geopolitical calm and an unchanging global order. It was like building a complex machine where every part relied on an external, unseen power source, assuming it would never falter. For Anna, the first faint echoes of dissonance began to surface, not as a crisis, but as subtle shifts. A new, slightly higher quote for a critical component from an overseas supplier, or an unexpected 3-week delay on a vital shipment. Minor inconveniences, perhaps, but they were tiny cracks in the previously seamless flow, hinting at an underlying fragility. If you're finding this analysis insightful and want to understand how seemingly correct decisions can generate profound, long-term consequences, consider subscribing and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Your engagement helps us reveal these deeper truths. The problem, however, was never isolated to single delays or minor cost increases. It was structural. The relentless pursuit of efficiency had inadvertently begun to hollow out Europe's domestic industrial capacity in crucial sectors, shifting core competencies and jobs abroad. This erosion wasn't immediately apparent, masked by overall economic growth, but it meant that Europe was slowly losing the ability to produce essential goods independently. The critical energy dependence on a single, increasingly unpredictable supplier evolved from a competitive advantage into an existential risk. Europe was dismantling its own strategic self-sufficiency, bit by bit, believing the global market would always provide, always remain stable. The consequences of the Euro project and the welfare state expansion also began to accumulate, like invisible pressure points. Without a corresponding fiscal or political union, the single currency imposed a rigid monetary policy that couldn't adapt to the diverse economic realities of member states. This led to divergent performances, exacerbating imbalances and stripping nations of tools like currency devaluation to adjust to economic shocks. Simultaneously, generous welfare provisions, while noble, faced unsustainable demographic pressures. Aging populations and declining birth rates meant fewer workers supporting more retirees, leading to spiraling labor costs that outpaced productivity gains. The promise of an unbreakable social contract was quietly being strained, placing an immense, silent burden on the system. For Anna, the once unquestioned logic of the system began to fray. Her company, a paragon of German precision, found itself increasingly vulnerable to these unseen forces. Projects that once flowed smoothly were now stalled by unpredictable supply chain disruptions. Not from lack of effort on her part, but from distant, unmanageable events. Budget cuts, once rare, became a frequent topic in management meetings, impacting her team's ability to innovate. The certainty that her diligent work translated directly into progress and security started to erode. She saw colleagues, equally dedicated, facing stagnant wages while the cost of living subtly crept upwards. This wasn't a personal failure. It was a creeping, unsettling dissonance between her meritocratic belief and the system's faltering ability to deliver on its implicit promises. The tension mounted as it became undeniably clear that the problems weren't isolated incidents or temporary blips in an otherwise robust machine. They were systemic, deeply embedded consequences of choices once hailed as genius. Europe, in its pursuit of an idealized efficiency and a harmonious social model, had unknowingly traded resilience for short-term gain, strategic autonomy for perceived economic advantage. The system that once guaranteed a secure future for people like Anna was quietly, almost imperceptibly, beginning to break its covenant. This silent rupture wasn't a thunderclap, but a series of soft, continuous tremors, gradually undermining the very foundations of European prosperity, setting the stage for an inevitable reckoning that few were prepared to acknowledge. The geopolitical tremors of the 2020s did not merely shake Europe. They violently tore open its carefully constructed facade of invulnerability. The Russia-Ukraine war, a conflict once deemed geographically distant, instantly morphed into an economic catastrophe on the continent's doorstep, proving the continent's profound strategic miscalculation. You witnessed, in real time, the weaponization of energy supply, transforming what was once a pragmatic economic advantage, cheap Russian gas, into an existential threat of staggering proportions. The pipelines that had fueled industries and warmed homes for decades became conduits of crisis, their flow manipulated for political leverage. Energy prices skyrocketed with unprecedented volatility, not as a market fluctuation, but as a direct, hostile act that ripped through the European economy. This was the moment the hidden dependencies, previously mere lines on a ledger, became tangible, suffocating realities, impacting every facet of the European industrial landscape with brutal force. This abrupt, weaponized energy shock delivered a fatal blow to industries that had, for decades, defined European economic prowess. Chemical plants, steel mills, and precision manufacturers, once the undisputed champions of global production, suddenly found their operational costs soaring to unsustainable levels. You cannot simply absorb a 500% increase in natural gas prices and remain competitive against rivals in regions with stable, affordable energy. The intricate dance of global supply chains, already strained by pandemic disruptions, now fractured completely, leaving factories idle and production lines silent. Europe's industrial base, once its greatest strength, was revealed as structurally dependent and strategically fragile, its very foundation eroded by the sudden removal of its cheapest fuel. This wasn't a temporary blip. It was a fundamental reordering of economic viability. The ripple effect of these industrial shocks was immediate and devastating, translating abstract economic forces into tangible human struggle. As energy costs permeated every layer of production, inflation, long dormant, roared to life, eroding the purchasing power of every single European household. You felt it at the grocery store, at the petrol pump, in your monthly utility bills. This wasn't just a statistical blip, it was a direct assault on your family's budget, forcing difficult choices. Consumer demand, the lifeblood of any healthy economy, shriveled under the weight of rising prices and pervasive uncertainty. This cascade effect led directly to widespread factory slowdowns, businesses cutting shifts, and ultimately, job losses. The stability Anna had always known in her community, underpinned by reliable employment, began to crumble, reflecting a dramatic decline in overall economic output. For Anna, this unfolding crisis was far more than an economic headline. It was a profound, personal betrayal. She had meticulously followed the unspoken contract: pursue education, work tirelessly, contribute with technical excellence, and the system would reward her with stability. She did everything right. Yet the world she had built, the future she had envisioned for her children, was now being systematically dismantled by forces beyond her control. You understand this feeling, the gnawing injustice when your diligent effort no longer guarantees a secure future. Her belief in meritocracy, once an unshakable pillar of her identity, began to crack under the relentless pressure of a system that no longer honored its implicit promises. The bedrock of her professional pride, her contribution to Germany's industrial heart, felt increasingly irrelevant in the face of such overwhelming structural decay. The despair deepened as Anna watched her company, once a paragon of German precision manufacturing, grapple with crippling energy costs and an unprecedented decline in orders. Projects she had meticulously planned and overseen were now stalled, not due to technical challenges, but because the foundational economics had collapsed. You see the stress in her eyes, the silent worry that replaces her usual professional confidence. The very real threat of relocation to a cheaper, more stable region, or even outright collapse, loomed over every meeting, every conversation on the factory floor. This wasn't just about profits. It was about livelihoods, about the skilled hands she worked alongside, about the community that depended on this industrial anchor. Her career trajectory, once a steady ascent, flattened into an uncertain plateau, a stark reflection of Europe's own diminished prospects. Anna experienced the acute frustration of seeing her lifelong effort, her hard-earned skills, and her unwavering dedication devalued by abstract systemic forces. The predictability she had always relied upon vanished, replaced by a suffocating sense of powerlessness. You can almost hear the question echoing in her mind. If hard work no longer guarantees security, if merit is no longer rewarded, what was it all for? The chasm between her expectation of continued progress and the harsh reality of structural decline widened daily, fostering a gnawing uncertainty about her children's future. This profound disillusionment is a silent crisis sweeping across a continent that once prided itself on stability. If this deep dive into structural flaws resonates with your own observations and leaves you questioning the future, consider subscribing. We continue to dissect these complex hidden truths, empowering you with understanding that mainstream narratives often miss. The true antagonists in this unfolding drama are not easily identifiable villains, but deeply entrenched structural forces, systems designed with good intentions yet laden with unforeseen consequences. First, consider the mal-designed energy transition policies. Europe embarked on an ambitious, often lauded path of rapid decarbonization, a noble goal, yet it did so without robust baseload alternatives or a truly strategic vision for energy independence. You prioritized ideology over pragmatic resilience, prematurely dismantling reliable power sources while failing to build adequate, secure replacements. This created a profound, self-inflicted vulnerability, leaving the entire continent utterly exposed when the external energy tap was suddenly tightened. The decision to rush towards a green future without a stable, diversified bridge created the very chasm now engulfing its industries. Compounding this vulnerability were the excessive regulatory burdens and pervasive bureaucratic inertia, both at national and EU levels. You witnessed a system stifling innovation and increasing operational costs for businesses, slowing their ability to adapt to a rapidly changing global landscape. Every new directive, every additional layer of red tape, chipped away at competitiveness, making it harder for companies like Anna's to thrive. Simultaneously, a disconnected political elite, often insulated from the harsh realities of industrial production and global competition, pursued ideological agendas over pragmatic economic resilience. They failed to anticipate the accumulating vulnerabilities, choosing instead to double down on assumptions of perpetual peace and stable supply. This detachment meant critical warnings were ignored, and necessary strategic shifts were postponed, leaving Europe unprepared for the inevitable shock. Further exacerbating the crisis were the asymmetric financial systems within the Eurozone, a project designed for unity, but creating unforeseen divisions. You imposed a one-size-fits-all monetary policy on vastly diverse economies, stripping individual nations of essential tools, like currency devaluation, to adjust to economic shocks. This exacerbated imbalances, creating a structural rigidity that amplified every downturn. And finally, the overarching antagonist, Europe's over-reliance on external dependencies. What began as a rational pursuit of cheap Russian energy and efficient global supply chains transformed into critical strategic vulnerabilities. You believed in the unwavering stability of global markets, but that belief proved to be a dangerous illusion, exposing the continent's industrial heart to the whims of geopolitics and distant disruptions. The critical decision point, or more accurately, the series of missed opportunities that became irreversible, was Europe's collective failure to strategically diversify its energy sources and rebuild industrial resilience in the decade preceding the 2022 energy crisis. You had ample warnings, geopolitical tremors signaling the increasing fragility of global supply chains and the volatile nature of relying on a single, autocratic energy supplier. Yet, the continent doubled down on its dependencies, prioritizing short-term cost efficiency and ideological commitments over long-term strategic security. Coordinated, massive investments in domestic renewable energy, nuclear power, and diversified global gas procurement. Before, the crisis hit were not made. Policies to reshore critical industrial production, to regain strategic autonomy, were ignored due to political complacency, the illusion of perpetual peace, and bureaucratic inertia. Once the energy crisis fully manifested, Europe's options became severely limited. It was forced to make reactive decisions under duress, with diminished capital and fragmented political will, solidifying a structurally embedded loss of industrial competitiveness that became irreversible. You are now witnessing the stark, undeniable validation of this thesis, playing out in real time across the European industrial heartland. Major industrial players, once the titans of global manufacturing and cornerstones of the continent's economic identity, are no longer merely struggling. They are actively dismantling their European footprint. Chemical giants like BASF, steel behemoths such as ArcelorMittal, and countless precision manufacturers have publicly announced significant production cuts, the closure of long-standing factories, or perhaps most tellingly, plans to shift their investments and entire operations to regions with lower, more predictable energy costs and less restrictive regulatory environments. Consider the United States with its revitalized industrial policy, or the burgeoning markets of Asia, now offering a more stable and competitive landscape. This is not an accident of fate, but the logical, unavoidable outcome of a system that traded strategic autonomy for a phantom efficiency. This industrial exodus is merely one facet of a broader, more insidious shift. Look closer, and you will observe a palpable acceleration of what is often euphemistically termed brain drain. Skilled young professionals, the very intellectual capital essential for innovation and future prosperity, are voting with their feet. Disillusioned by diminishing opportunities, stagnant wages that fail to keep pace with soaring living costs, and a pervasive sense of economic precarity. They are emigrating to other continents, seeking the stability and upward mobility that Europe once guaranteed. Simultaneously, hard economic data confirms what you instinctively feel: a persistent decline in productivity growth, real wages that consistently lag behind inflation, and a widening chasm in per capita GDP growth when compared to global competitors. This is not a temporary blip, it is the irreversible bleeding of talent and economic vitality, a silent hollowing out of a once vibrant future. The cumulative effect of these structural dislocations is a tangible, irreversible shift in the standard of living for millions across Europe. The social contract, that implicit promise of a dignified life earned through hard work, has been fundamentally altered. You see it in the rising tide of energy poverty, where families struggle to heat their homes or keep the lights on, a stark contrast to the continent's once assured prosperity. Access to quality social services, long a hallmark of the European model, is being incrementally reduced, stretched thin by escalating costs and diminishing public coffers. A pervasive sense of economic precarity now hangs heavy in the air, replacing the former confidence with a gnawing uncertainty. This isn't just a statistical downturn, it's a redefinition of what it means to be European, a lowering of expectations that few would have imagined just a decade ago. The illusion of perpetual stability has shattered, leaving behind a stark, colder reality. If this current trajectory continues, the systemic consequences will be profound, etching themselves into the very fabric of society for generations to come. Future generations, your children and grandchildren, will not inherit the prosperous, stable continent their parents enjoyed. Instead, they will face a future marked by diminished economic prospects, a crushing burden of higher public debt, and severely reduced social mobility. The quality of life once taken for granted will become a distant memory, replaced by a constant struggle to maintain basic standards. Europe's global role will irrevocably shrink, transforming from an economic powerhouse and an agenda setter on the world stage into a mere regional player, increasingly reliant on the security umbrella of the United States and irresistibly drawn into the economic gravitational pull of burgeoning Asian markets. This is the inevitable future you are being shown, a future where influence wanes and autonomy erodes. If this meticulously crafted narrative has opened your eyes to the profound structural shifts reshaping our world, and if you believe that understanding these complex truths is essential for navigating what comes next, then you must subscribe. We are here to continuously dissect these unfolding realities, connecting the dots that others miss, and providing you with the clarity needed to understand the future as it forms. This transformation signifies a permanent loss of strategic autonomy, a continent no longer dictating its own terms, but reacting to external pressures. Its influence in global governance, once robust and assertive, will inevitably wane, reduced to a whisper where it once roared. Economically, the continent is likely to experience prolonged stagnation, a slow but relentless deindustrialization, as its foundational industries continue to migrate or simply cease to exist. This will be accompanied by a widening technological gap, as innovation struggles to flourish in an environment of high costs and diminished investment. You are witnessing the recalibration of a continent's place in the world, a descent from global leadership to a more constrained, reactive existence. The path chosen, or rather the paths not taken, have led to this inescapable outcome. Socially, the erosion of the welfare state will become undeniable, a painful unraveling of the safety nets that once defined European compassion. Rising inequality will exacerbate internal tensions, creating deeper societal rifts and potentially leading to political fragmentation, as different factions vie for dwindling resources and influence. The very concept of the European social model, once a beacon of shared prosperity and collective well-being, will undergo a fundamental, irreversible transformation. It will shift from a model of upward mobility and collective advancement to one of managed decline, where the focus is no longer on growth, but on allocating scarcity. This is not a prediction of chaos, but a sober assessment of an inevitable transition, a profound redefinition of communal life. This story, the meticulous deconstruction of Europe's decline, teaches a crucial, universal lesson. Prosperity, built on unaddressed structural vulnerabilities and external dependencies, is inherently fragile. It exposes the high price of complacency, the dangerous illusion that complex systems, once established, are immutable and immune to change. Europe's journey, from an industrial powerhouse to a continent grappling with managed decline, reveals a pattern that extends far beyond its borders. It demonstrates unequivocally that even the most robust structures, those built on decades of success and confident assumptions, will ultimately crumble when their foundational premises are challenged and critical flaws are left unaddressed. This is not just Europe's story. It is a blueprint for understanding the fragility of any system that ignores fundamental truths. You should care deeply about this narrative, not because it offers comfort, but because it offers clarity. This is not merely an account of European economic woes. It is a meticulously detailed blueprint for understanding how seemingly stable systems can unravel with devastating speed. It shows you precisely how abstract economic forces translate into tangible human struggle, affecting lives like Anna's and potentially your own. It underscores why foresight, adaptability, and unwavering strategic independence are paramount for any nation or region seeking to secure its future in an increasingly volatile world. As you reflect on these truths, remember that understanding these underlying currents is not just knowledge, it is power. The future is not predetermined, but its outlines are drawn by the consequences of today's unexamined assumptions.